Hopefully it isn't too long till Dragon Age the Veilguard does come out, and then we can find out what is actually happening. But at the moment, a lot of Dragon Age fans are wondering who will actually be returning to the series. I know the developers have been mentioning that there are lots of returning characters and cameos set to come through, and there's lots of fingers being crossed. I think I'm just crossing at least 3 or 4, trying to get up to 8 at the moment, and maybe some toes as well to see what we can do. But I thought I'd go through some characters from the series which I think will return. I mean, of course, I wouldn't know exactly who would be returning, but I think there's a strong chance that a few characters will return. I got a list of 7 characters who I think will return. It was meant to be 5, but then it started to grow, and then I had to cut it off at some point. And then I've got another 4 characters where I think these characters, I would like to see them return, but I just don't see it happening, unfortunately. You know, at some point, some characters, they can't come along. It has been quite a long time, at least in game time, and never mind real life time. You know, from Dragon Age Origins to Inquisition and then on to Veilguard, it's about 20 years in game. So some characters potentially have passed on, or they're not going to come back. I mean, it is the game is set in Northern Thedas, and if characters are predominantly located in Southern Thedas, they're not really going to come back, especially if they're in a very important position. This probably gives you a hint of a character or two who I don't think are returning, but of course you have to wait till later in the video to find out who that is. So starting off, we got Meryl, obviously from Dragon Age 2 and from the Dalish elf origin in Dragon Age Origins. I think Meryl, she's got a good chance of appearing. I think she, as a Dalish elf who was very interested in magic, the Eluvian, and interested in the heritage of the Dalish, would be quite intrigued by Solas's plan, and she's obviously wants to learn the history of her people, and I think that could draw her in because she's quite a bubbly and naive person, and I don't think Solas would exploit that. I think Solas' status as Fen'Haral would certainly draw Meryl towards him, and I think just wanting to learn the history of the elven people would make Meryl want to join. I mean, it is a little bit dependent because she is interested in blood magic, and I don't think Solas is particularly keen on that really because of the sacrifices by the old elven gods. It's said in Dragon Age Inquisition by Varric, but also by Hawke, that she's been in Kirkwall trying to keep the elven population safe there while the mages and Templars have been fighting. But of course in Inquisition, the Templar War is over, and if Meryl is romanced by Hawke, she might might try and follow him to Whitesapt, where Hawke, depends on what happens to Hawke, I suppose. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Hawke is actually left in the Fade. She is quite keen on bringing that down, but then again, the Dragon Age developers have said that they're not really going to address the characters left in the Fade at this point, so that could work against me. But I think, you know, there's a good chance we might see Meryl again. So fingers crossed, like to see her, and hopefully it's not a bad ending anyway. So next up, another Dragon Age 2 character, Isabella. Of course, we do know that Isabella is originally from Rivain, and of course Rivain is set to be a location that we will visit in the Veilguard, and of course there has been mention that there's been problems with dragons in the area, and I think, you know, we have Tash is from there, so maybe a possibility we might get some sort of interaction with there. I mean, it would be pretty great if we could meet Isabella and make her the pirate queen of the nation. That would be pretty fun. There is a mention similar to Meryl where if Isabella was romanced by Hawke, they might try and meet up at Weissapt. That'd be quite interesting. I think Varric did mention that Isabella styles herself as an admiral, so that'd be interesting to see if we do get her. I mean, of course, she's involved a little bit. I mean, she is quite more involved in the comics and the books compared to, say, Meryl. So I think BioWare has more of a plan to do with Isabel than perhaps with Meryl. She is quite a fun character. I think my canon state Hawk did romance her, so that would be fun to see how that does actually impact the next game. Now, our next character, and you'll be glad to hear, is not a Dragon Age 2 character, and that is Iron Bull. Now, I think Iron Bull will appear, obviously it is kind of dependent upon your choice, because if Iron Bull is still loyal to the Queen, then he will be killed off in Trespasser, but if he becomes Talvashok, then he will stay loyal to the Inquisition, or the Inquisitor at the very least. And if he's not romanced, and Dorian isn't romanced, then parts of one of the end credits you can have Iron Bull and Dorian in a relationship, and of course Dorian does return back to Tevinter, so that'll be a nice little cameo to have him back there, perhaps maybe similar to the War Table, or a little cameo where he's actually supporting strikes on behalf of Dorian, and we could have a little interaction with him. I think he'd been quite good as a companion again. I quite like the character. I think he's got more to say, really, a bigger story, and I think he could quite work well with the potential collapse of the Tevinter realm that could potentially happen in Veilguard. Now, next up we have our first Dragon Age Origins character, and that is Sten. So, similar to Isabella, he's featured quite a bit in terms of comics and what happens to him following the original Dragon Age Origins. And what we know is that the previous Arishok in the Qun died in Kirkwall, and Sten replaced him. Of course, due to customs, he's not called Sten anymore. He's called the Arishok. So, if you haven't played Dragon Age Origins, it's going to be basically like a new character. But hopefully there are little bits and pieces in the game to give us clues that he did fight during the Blight. Like I said, it's been about 20 years since, in game time anyway. That'll be quite fun. Of course, he's had interactions with Isabella during the comics, so that could add another extra layer to a potential cameo, which I'll be really delighted to see, really. And next up, another Dragon Age Origins character. Of course, I think this character has probably been underutilized, and probably the character has not got attention in terms of romances from the Dragon Age Origins, and that, of course, is Zevran. So, of course, you know that Zevran, an elven assassin, was a member of the Antivan Crows, who we're going to have a companion in Lucanus, who's actually, is a member. That's all a bit on the line. We'll see what happens in Dragon Age Veilguard, but from what we know with Zevran, after Dragon Age Origins, of course, if he dies in your Dragon Age Origins, he's not going to turn up at all, but at least I can say from my particular game, he survived. He's a good companion to my Warden. He appears in Dragon Age 2, and keep him alive then. And then we have in Dragon Age Inquisition, there's a few missions that are involved in the War Table. You ask for help to evade the Crows, which do your part one way or the other, and it'd be nice to see him return, because he had that bit of a weird redesign in Dragon Age 2, which I don't think everyone particularly liked. Hopefully he goes back to similar design that he had in Origins, of course, with updated model, and I think that could quite work well with Lucanus for whatever perhaps personal quest is going on through there, because maybe we'll make, similar to Isabella, we could make Zevran the leader of the Crows, or very high in the Antivan Crows. I think that would be quite a nice send-off for the character. If we do have any future games, we don't have to involve them then. I think this game could be quite good in getting some of our older characters the final send-off, which would be nice to see. Now, next up is our lyrium-infused elven friend from Dragon Age 2, and that's Fenris. I think Fenris, he's another character, a bit like Isabella, who's been quite heavily involved in the comics after their initial appearance. Of course, as a character, he has got a history with Divinta Magisters. He absolutely hates mages and their schemes, so he's certainly not going to get along with whatever Solus has planned, and obviously, of course, what will happen with the old gods. I think he could be an interesting one to have, potentially through war table missions, similar to what I mentioned about Severin. I think I might have a slight theme here. 3 out of the 7 are elves. I think that's just the nature of the game and the characters that are available. But powerful warrior character who is distrustful of mages and has a reason to with his history in Divinta. I think he's got a lot more to say, and I think BioWare agree with his involvement in the external media. The final character, it is a bit of a stretch perhaps, but I've gone with, I think, Shale. Now, before you start writing any angry comments, just let me go through my thoughts first. Also, obviously, Shale, what we know is that Shale was a war golem. She was previously a dwarf, and she was converted willingly. Now, she didn't really exactly have her memories, but at the end of the game, she wanted to go to Divinta with Wynne to try and see if it's possible to get herself back into her human form. I mean, there are only problem, perhaps you say, with that is that Wynne does pass away after the event of Dragon Age Origins, and we don't really hear anything about Shale afterwards, 2 or Inquisition, but the possibility is that a strange dwarf appears in Veilguard, which, it is a little bit of a stretch, but I've got my fingers crossed that she does turn up. I think it is probably the most unlikely of the characters I've picked out who I think will return, but it could be quite interesting to get that perspective from someone who used to be a golem and then return to be back to their previous form. I mean, I kind of makes you wonder how old Shale is at that point. I don't think it's very clear when she was converted. Could be several hundred years. The timeline of the Dragon Age series is a bit not exactly great in terms of knowing exactly how many years it is, but perhaps if you know exactly from when Shale was created to at least Dragon Age Origins, how many years that is. I mean, I don't think she'd have some sort of rapid age. I don't think that would happen, because I think that'd be quite dull to have, especially if it was off screen. I do want to see what potentially could have happened to her, and if she does become original form, and maybe she has some sort of magical abilities that make her different from other dwarves. We do know that Scout Harding is meant to get some sort of magical ability, even though we know that dwarves can't really conduct magic. Maybe that's something that could happen, especially what's happening with Solus, all his shenanigans in the Veilguard. So let me know what you think of those. And now moving on to characters I think unfortunately will not be returning. Okay, so characters I don't think will come back. So of course the entire Dragon Age Awakening cast. Well, perhaps that's kind of obvious, but also perhaps a bit too joke. Then again, Valana might have been an interesting character to actually return, though I think BioWare has kind of forgotten about that plot at this point. But anyway, onto the first one. So I think Aveline, she won't be returning. I think starting off probably a pretty safe one, I would say. At the end of Dragon Age 2, she's basically in charge of Kirkwall, because I know technically Varric eventually become the Viscount of Kirkwall, but since Varric is in Inquisition, you're going off with the Inquisitor, and then he's spending the next 10 years or so searching for Solus. He's not really being in Kirkwall to run things, so as far as we're aware, I think that Aveline is kind of in charge as one of the leading members of the society there, and she's quite settled in there. I don't think we'll be seeing Kirkwall in Inquisition. I mean, it would be quite nice if there was a sequel to the Netflix Dragon Age show, that we do get Kirkwall with Aveline there. That would be a nice little addition. But in terms of Veilguard, I think she's quite settled in there. And also, it's 10 years gone by. It's been 10 years. She's probably married. Well, no, I think she already is married by the end of Dragon Age 2. I don't think we will be seeing that again. I mean, I think she's quite a fun character, but sometimes, it is best to leave characters where they are and move on to different characters. Maybe we could get some sort of like a war table type little mission or codex entry as to what's happened to her the last 10 years, but I think that should be about it really from her character. So next one from Dragon Age Inquisition, and that's Sarah. So I think Sarah, I don't think we're not going to see her involved. I think it's unlikely. Obviously there's the Friends of Red Jenny. Will that really be involved in Northern Thedas? I got the impression it's more of a southern thing, maybe Orlais based. I think there are lots of different factions involved in Tevinter, but I think we'll have a Friends of Red Jenny. I mean, I think there is that little side option. If you don't romance Sarah, she will end up with potentially Dagna, which is quite interesting, because obviously Dagna is a little bit of a different sort of dwarf, which maybe could pull Sarah into a certain extent, but I think, like I said, in terms of geography, you can't be everywhere, and I think it's more of a southern Thedas area, and again, it is 10 years past the point of Inquisition. I think she will be too involved in Orlais and Ferelden, really too involved in Tevinter, Ravain, and Tiva in the north, and I think her organisation of Red Jennies might have difficulty with the likes of the Crows, who are quite well embedded, which could stop any Red Jenny sort of interaction. It'd be interesting what they try and do with her in the 10 years in game life, but a bit like Aveline. I think I wouldn't mind a little bit of war table stuff with Red Jenny, and maybe the odd codex entry just to see what they've been up to, because I think, like a lot of characters, you just want to know how they've been the previous 10 years. And then we've got another Dragon Age Inquisition character. I mean, I've got a thing against Dragon Age Inquisition, just my particular thoughts on those characters, and that's Cole. Now I think obviously Cole, he's a spirit that could become human depending on your actions, and I think maybe we do know at the end of the game, obviously depend on your outcomes, what your decision. They do, if he becomes human, he does travel around with Maridon, traveling across Thedas, where they're trying to ease the pain of people, which means potentially he could be back. Of course, if you pick Spirit, he will return to the Fade, which, again, you could say, well, if Solus his plan has affected the Fade, and somehow maybe he could return that aspect, which that would be quite interesting to see if we are with the Veilguard's interaction with the Fade. That could come back, but I think at this point it's probably Cole. It's probably moved on, and there'll be lots of different spirits. And if he is travelling around as a human, there's quite a large area we don't know whether or not he could have gone to Tevinter. But then again, if he feels a lot of pain in Tevinter, maybe they'll both be going around there, and we could get the songs for Maridon, which would be quite interesting. Now, I'm not sure the next one is a little bit controversial. My first Dragon Age 1, and that's Liliana. She's been very important in Dragon Age Origins, partly involved in Dragon Age 2, and of course major involvement in Dragon Age Inquisition, and of course one of the romance options for your Warden from the original Origins. I just think at certain points characters need to be left behind, retired. They've achieved their purpose. Hopefully she's gone off with her Warden to try and help stop the blights, or if maybe they are the Divine and they're a bit busy in Southern Thedas. Of course, the Chant is involved in Ravain and Tiva as well, but it does seem like it's more as an Orlais sort of institution. So if we're not really going to Orlais and you've made Liliana the Divine, well, she can't really go anywhere, and I think her character probably needs to come to an end. Shame perhaps not to see her 10 years on, but but sometimes it's good to let new characters come through. I mean, there are a bunch of characters that I have mentioned who you think you probably would like to see, but you think it's unlikely we will see them. I think probably a lot of people may be thinking Morrigan because of she's quite an important character. I know we've had the Claudia Black information about she's not appearing, which that's quite a shame, really. Hopefully, I mean, fingers crossed there isn't quite the truth, because we obviously did have the where to had a little dip in the fountain of Mafall, so we'll just see if that does come into play in the Veilguard. I mean, I got fun with it, it's not going to make that much difference, but that would be quite interesting if it does, if the Inquisitor or Morrigan does return, and whoever's taken the dip is affected. That's who I thought might not be returning. You'll let me know in the comments who you think you would like to see return, but don't think they're going to return. And also, as the characters I mentioned earlier, who I think will come back, who do you think will come back? I mean, it'd be interesting to see some names, perhaps non-characters, non-companions who could return. I mean, I did quite like what happened with Morrigan and Liliana. They came back as advisors rather than companions. I think that works quite well, and I'd be quite happy with that, really, if a character could come back, because obviously your characters are older. If some, like the characters I mentioned earlier, like Severin, maybe he comes back as an advisor, that would be pretty good. But of course, like I've said, mention in the comments what you think, and of course, if you are new around here and you found this interesting, please subscribe, and we'll chat with you next time. Thanks, bye.